In opening my remarks, I would have to make the point that the way the Cabinet Secretary and the SNP government have brought forward this legislation leaves a lot to be desired. The policy memorandum accompanying the bill states that, and I quote, "The bill provides for the modernisation, consolidating and extending of hate crime legislation in Scotland. Legislation in this area has evolved over time in a fragmented manner, with the result that different elements of hate crime law are located in different statutes. There is a lack of consistency and the relevant legislation is not as user-friendly as it could be. The new hate crime legislation will provide greater clarity, transparency and consistency." So you would have to say, that seems like a good objective. But as we know and has been acknowledged by the government, the draft bill published by the government was pretty poor and raised more concerns than it did offer answers. I note that the committee report states that a substantial proportion of respondents, including most individuals, had concerns about the impact of hate crime laws on freedom of speech and religious expression, and about laws designated to protect specific groups. Many called for the repeal of hate crime laws, or at least did not want such laws to be extended. These views shaped the response of the consultation, the committee said. And I have to say, this reflects many of the contacts that I have received from individuals raising their concerns and calling for parts of the bill to be scrapped, as they believe the bill will threaten freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And therefore, while some have praised the Cabinet Secretary for willing to compromise, I believe that bringing forward such an ill-considered and ill-drafted bill has been a major folly. And the danger with that is that we allow this bill to be politicised in a way that it should not have been, and we allow political parties, as we're seeing tonight, where the Tories are not even prepared to allow, despite the hard work of the committee, to allow this bill to go forward to the next stage. As most organisations, I would have to say, have said in terms of supporting the principle of the bill, it becomes politicised and people use it for political gain to try and get political votes. And that's the real problem, and that is the major mistake that the Cabinet Secretary brought forward when he brought forward a piece of legislation that was simply not fit for purpose, and he should acknowledge that. I'm certainly clear that hate and prejudice have no place in Scotland, and that it is important to have clear and robust laws to deal with hate crimes committed within our society. I am equally supportive of the overall principles of the hate crime bill and agree that it is important to consolidate hate crime legislation into one body of law. And I believe that the evidence that from the different organisations that we have had over this last week or so and the work of the committee is also supportive of the principle of this bill. It is welcome that the Scottish Government has conceded that amendments are necessary to make Part 2 of the bill fit for purpose, requiring intent for the new stirring-up offence will be an improvement to the provisions. However, Scottish Labour still have concerns about the bill as currently drafted and agree that improvements are still needed to Part 2 to ensure that it includes adequate protections for freedom of speech and thought, and it does not criminalise legitimate views. Although it is encouraging that the Cabinet Secretary has shown willingness to improve the freedom of expression provision in the bill, we believe that he should set out further how he intends to amend this area generally and in section 12 of the bill. Public understanding of the bill will rely on clarity within the legislation over the terms used. That's why we believe and support the committee's recommendation for improvements to the definitions used within the bill so that the language is up to date and the application of provisions such as reasonable defence are clear. So I would urge the Cabinet Secretary not to take a view that is arrogant and failing to acknowledge the failures in bringing this bill forward in the way he did. Work together, the committee have done a great deal of work to try and bail him out. Work together, and I would urge the Tories not to play politics, because this is a key piece of legislation that, done right, is good for Scotland.